Okay, so for my YouTube sample video, I'm just going to do a brief timeline of American history. So, first we have the American Revolution in 1776, and that's when the United States declared itself as an independent nation from the tyrannical government of Great Britain. And then when we move forward a little bit, the main theme going into the early Republic period was westward expansion, and that really began around the early 1800s up until let's just say 1850. And all through this, you had westward expansion. More states were admitted into the Union, and one of the problems that arose was the slavery issue. Because as America was moving westward, the debate was whether or not to have more states admitted into the Union as slave or free. So then, in 1861, South Carolina becomes the first state to secede from the Union over the issue of states' rights, among other things, including slavery. So we'll put an S for South. The South secedes. And the Civil War ensues to about 1865. And towards the end of that war, Abraham Lincoln is assassinated, and the North wins the war, of course. And then we have a period of Reconstruction, which lasts about 1866 up until 1877. And then this is when the North tries to rebuild the South, and they install military districts to ensure that the South supports civil rights and freed slaves' rights. And then moving along, shortly after this, we have what we call the Second Industrial Revolution. And this was just a period of rapid growth in terms of industry, manufacturing, steel making, ship making. Let's give a rough estimate about 1870s up until we'll just say 1920, shortly after the automobile was invented. And then fast forward, we have World War I. The United States technically remained neutral in world affairs up until that point. But then the sinking of the Lusitania brought us into that war. And then we remain neutral again, and then fast forward, we have World War II and the bombings of Pearl Harbor via the Japanese Empire drew the United States into that war. About 1941 to 1944, 45. And then that begins the start of the Cold War, which is pretty much just, it was an ideological war between the U.S. and the USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And that lasts from about 1945 all the way up until 1991. And you can see that some of these years overlap because some of these events are happening at the same time. So within this time frame, actually I'll put this date over here, 1991, because within this time frame we have several other events going on. We have the Korean War. We have Vietnam. And civil rights is also going on at this time. Mainly focusing on the 1950s and the 1960s. So it's kind of interesting because when we go all the way back to the Reconstruction period, this is when Congress passes the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, guaranteeing civil rights to persecuted groups of people in the past. But many of those rights aren't fully gained and they're not fully garnered until the 1950s and 60s, when we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and 1965. And then fast forward a little bit, after the 90s, America suffers a great tragedy, 9/11. And the reason that I put this as a significant event in American history is because the Department of Homeland Security was created, of course, expanding the federal government, and this is when the War on Terror begins. So, and the reason I have an arrow here is because this War on Terror and many of the things associated with 9/11 we are still dealing with today in the present age. So there you have it, a little brief history of the United States. Thank you.